Did Kurt Volker, the U.S. Special Representative for Ukraine, interfere in Ukraine's internal affairs? Are the EU democracy support efforts actually colonization methods? And is it true that half of Ukrainians who are internally displaced from the Donbas because of Russia's invasion and war can't find work? The truth remains a prisoner in the Kremlin's gulag of disinformation. But this is StopFake, the place where we set the record straight on fakes about Ukraine. I'm Marko Suprun, so get ready for some debunking. Pro-Kremlin site Ukraine.ru accused U.S. Special Representative for Ukraine Kurt Volker of interfering in Ukraine's internal affairs. The story cites Viktor Medvedchuk, the leader of the opposition Platform for Life party, who during a television interview said that Volker had exceeded his authority and violated Ukrainian legislation. In an April 4 interview with the American PBS public broadcaster, Kurt Volker was asked if he thought presidential candidate and front-runner Volodymyr Zelensky was a person around whom Ukraine could unite. Volker answered that the election in Ukraine is similar to the last elections in France, the UK, and even the US. Zelensky has positioned himself as being against the establishment, and the Ukrainian public is faced with a choice. Here's what Volker said.
Do they want someone who is just going against the establishment, promising massive reform? Or do they want someone who maybe has been disappointed to them in some respects, but has done more on reform than anyone else has in Ukraine for the past 20 years and stood up to Putin?
Now, Medvedchuk was asked on the News One television channel if he thought that Volker's statement that President Poroshenko enacted more reforms than anyone else in Ukraine over the last 20 years was an interference in Ukraine's internal affairs. Medvedchuk responded that by saying what he said, Volker in fact supported President Poroshenko. This is not just interference in Ukraine's internal affairs. This is an element of external government whose regime was introduced in 2014. On April 11, Volker participated in the Kyiv Security Forum and sent a video message to the participants. He reminded the audience that the United States does not endorse any particular candidate in any election, but stands for principles. Volker said,
"We believe strongly in supporting Ukraine in the development of its democratic institutions, in economic reform, in fighting corruption, and in building a strong, sovereign, secure state, building security for the people of Ukraine."
Finally, U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine Marie Yovanovitch also noted that Washington does not support any particular candidate, but rather supports, quote, the rule of law, democracy, security, and the goals of the Ukrainian people. Apparently, the European Union is increasing financing of events aimed to influence the internal affairs of other countries. In 2020, the EU intends to allocate 1.5 million euro to promote democracy, and this, according to Russian political analysts, is a tool for modern-day colonization of other states. RT wrote, "Measures to promote democracy are simply mechanisms for creating an infrastructure of influence and a network of agents of influence with financing to achieve their goals." These fake Russian media claims are based on the European Parliament's estimates of revenue and expenditure for the 2020 financial year. The document shows that next year, the EU intends to increase democracy support spending and parliamentary support by 1,335,000 euros. These funds will be dispersed, first of all, to countries currently seeking EU membership who are actively promoting domestic reform and demonstrate commitment to European democratic values and the protection of human rights. The democracy support plan also includes support for young leaders in Maghreb, Eastern Europe, and Russia. Support for young leaders appears to have particularly drawn the ire of the Russian commentariat, who claim that this kind of support is intervention in the internal affairs of other countries, particularly Russia. Now, the EU is one of the world's largest donors of humanitarian democratic programs. Such programs are aimed at developing liberal institutions and maintaining peace and security, and not at imposing policies and viewpoints in other countries. The work of numerous European foundations supporting democracy focuses on education, strengthening human rights, journalism training, and independent media support. These programs are first and foremost educational and empowering. The EU emphasizes, quote, "Democracy and freedom cannot be imported or imposed from the outside. The mechanism of change which will ensure a stable democratization process engaging all elements of society can only be launched from within." Russian and Ukrainian media reported on April 9 that more than half of Ukraine's internally displaced persons, or IDPs, who left Russian-occupied Donbas can't find employment on Ukrainian territory. These stories refer to a study by Ukraine's National System for IDP Monitoring, but do not provide any links to the study itself. They also claim that because IDPs can't find housing in Ukraine, they return to the occupied territories. Ukraine's Ministry of Social Policy, the Ministry of Temporarily Occupied Territories, together with the United Nations International Organization for Migration, presented a study on the problems facing Ukraine's IDPs. The study is based on focus group surveys, telephone and personal interviews of 6,500 IDPs out of 1.6 million officially registered displaced persons. The study addresses employment problems facing Ukraine's IDPs and finds that 48% of those surveyed were economically inactive. The largest share of those were pensioners at 24%. 15% were persons doing housework or looking after children or other persons in the household. 4% were persons with disabilities, 4% were students, and 1% were unemployed but not seeking employment. According to the latest round of surveys by the International Organization for Migration, 44% of IDPs are currently employed, while before being displaced by Russia's invasion of eastern Ukraine, about 60% had a job. Among surveyed IDPs, 52% were economically active, including respondents who were either employed, about 44%, or actively seeking employment and ready to start working within a 2-week period, around 8%. Unfortunately, this survey data was presented in a distorted manner by both Russian and Ukrainian media, inventing catastrophic unemployment figures and creating a dire picture of IDP life, which even without these scaremongering stories is already a very challenging reality. That's it for this week. You can find much more dissected disinformation on the StopFake website. Be vigilant, look out for fakes, and if you spot any disinformation about Ukraine, forward it to us for a truth autopsy. I'm Marko Suprun, and this is StopFake. Thanks for watching.